Stephen Lashley, Minister of Culture, Sports and Youth, Chairman Professor Welch and other members of the task force, heads of department, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all of you. I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to everyone here this morning, particularly JS, as it is my understanding that this presentation will be publicized so that the general public would also be able to be aware of the existence of this very important report. This presentation of Barbados Report on Reparations is certainly a moment that we should all relish and enjoy. It is the first document of its kind to be produced by the Barbados government, and it gives me great pleasure to bear testimony to its existence. By adopting the 10-point plan for a region-wide reparations movement, makes it truly a remarkable and inspiring achievement that we should all be proud to be part of. As Permanent Secretary acting, I want to extend to you and the members of the task force much love and much respect for the work done thus far. I encourage you this morning that despite the ups and downs and even zigs and zags that may come before you, the task force must propel forward with the struggle for reparations. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Youth stands in full support with you. The struggle will be a protracted one, but through these challenges, let us be reminded of the classic saying, tell no lies and claim no easy victories. That is by Amcar Cabral. I therefore wish to thank the task force and to let you know that the Minister and his staff are certainly very happy to cooperate with all of you to facilitate this presentation and other reparation activities as we continue to enlighten all Barbadians on the richness of this history. I take this opportunity to wish you a very blessed Christmas and successful 2018. I thank you.
It is certainly, for us in the task force, a very important occasion and a special privilege that we are able today to present the report of our findings and our discussions over the past few years. Before I go any further, I wish to express my thanks to the Minister and the Ministry and the staff, but also especially to the members of the task force who are here, those who are here with us. Some of our members are not here. I apologize for their absence. One of our members, Bishop Seal, is overseas. There's another member who is on another assignment. There are others who also have other assignments this morning and could not be here. But we have with us the Deputy Chair of the Task Force, Madame Couture Bab. We have Brother Trevor Marshall, who's well known. Reverend Badilaria, who's also well known. Monsignor Blackett, who is also very well known. And the Director of the Pan-African Commission, Dr. Derek Murray, who is also very well known and who played a very integral role in helping to get us started. So let me thank them again for their participation. I also note that we have present with us the Director of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. It is particularly important that the Director is here with us because the Barbados Museum is one of the repositories of our heritage and is particularly important. Again, welcome to those others who have come here from the Ministry, Comrade Denny and others. We are very happy that you're here with us. One of the most important aspects of the search for reparatory justice has been the struggle to achieve clarity in defining what is meant by the term reparations, in the context of addressing the legacy of enslavement in our region and our island. The difficulty in directing the public to its contextual meaning is compounded by the fact that other reparatory causes have largely focused on monetary solutions. Thus, we note the reparations paid by Germany to the other European countries after World War I, the reparations paid by Germany to Israel after the Holocaust of World War II, and the monies paid in 1988 by the USA to the descendants of Japanese interned during World War II. There are several instances of reparations following warfare. In our Barbadian and the wider Caribbean context, however, reparations, while it includes consideration of monetary payment, is much wider than that monetary payment. It is easier to understand reparations in our context if we use a number of alliterative terms that collectively capture the wider sense in which the term is used by us, that is the task force on reparations. The terms that I choose to use at this point to help to broaden our understanding of the term reparations are inclusively repair, restitution, remediation, restoration, repayment, realignment. It is interesting to know that all these words have a prefix re in it. And re is a Latin term that means again. Sometimes it means back, going back to some of the previous time. Go back in the sense of going back to a more advantageous position. In short, reparations has a lot to do with taking our people back to a position in which they may with pride embrace their African origins, and it also refers to taking them back to an attempt to restore what has been lost through the experience of enslavement. This will of course include encouraging self-repair, as if Bob Marley's Emancipate Yourself. It will also seek to encourage those nations who built their economies on the backs of our ancestors and us to take the moral high ground and accept responsibility for that episode in our history, which we hope will lead to some action that may be quantified in monetary terms. However, again to reiterate, reparations is a very wide term that really has to do with repairing a damage, a hurt that was inflicted on our people. We still suffer from that hurt today. In our report, we note that, for example, in Barbados, it was not until 1937, almost 100 years after the abolition of enslavement, that the Masters and Servants Act was abolished in Barbados. It took 100 years after emancipation for that obnoxious and repressive piece of legislation to be removed from the statute books. We also note that there are many of the laws that were passed during the period of the so-called period of emancipation, and incidentally, I prefer to use the word abolition rather than emancipation, because emancipation is a process, but abolition relates to what happened in 1834, 1838. It's important for us to note that, that many of the laws that were passed then by the Barbados House of Assembly at that time were repressive laws. They were laws that sought to limit our people's expectations of abolition, but the objective was to prevent our people from realizing their expectations. That's an issue. There are other acts and laws that were passed which show us that while it may be said that abolition came in 1838, that for another 100 years and more, there were problems that faced the people that had their genesis in the period of enslavement. We may note that the Tenantry Freehold Act, which had its antecedents in work done by the late Right Excellent Earl Walton Barrow, which came in another administration, that the Tenantry Freehold Act, which came many years after emancipation, was in fact an expression of our need to redress the problems of the past. As you know, many of our ancestors lived on plantation lands. And it is interesting to note, I'm just going to say this very quickly so we get a sense of what's happening, to note that when a commission visited Barbados in 1890s and they interviewed the planters, one planter gave evidence in which he said that the laborers on the plantation were charged additional fees for the tenantry plots that they had, that they were occupying. In addition to that, the laborers had planted the sweet potatoes and the edos, or dashi. They had planted the guinea corn, they had planted the pigeon peas, but they were also expected, in addition to the very low wages which they received, and the additional fees which they had to pay, they expected to buy those things which they had already planted. It is no wonder then that many that sub-persons refer to the potato riots of the 1890s and later on when many of our ancestors went to the potato fields and dug potatoes, apparently illegally, that what they were practicing was a kind of moral economy. What they were saying is that we planted these things. Our labor went into the plantations. Our labor did this. And you're denying us this. But this is also something which speaks to what happened to our ancestors. We speak of some of our young people who were put into the famous Dodds for eating sugarcane, for taking sugarcane from land. I'm not suggesting that it equates to selling sugarcane on the boats of Barbados in our current time, but I'm speaking about young people who are simply eating a piece of cane, and people are sent to Dodds for that. It's in that context, therefore, that this report makes a number of suggestions to the government through the minister. Those suggestions are many. There's about over 25, I think there are 27 recommendations, and these recommendations speak to such issues as our education, because we are not satisfied that the Barbadian public knows enough about what happened to our people, and therefore there's a sense that our people deny where we came from. It's not uncommon for Barbadians to say, me, I'm into broad-based terms, I'm an African. I'm not African. Whenever I look in the mirror, I see where I've come from. Lastly, just to give an illustration of how sometimes our people get affected by this denial, there's a Cuban poet called Nicolas Guillen, and I'm fond of using this as an example. He has a poem called Songo Roco Songo, which if you read the Spanish, makes a very interesting reading. And he observed the women in the streets of Havana, this is not Barbados, but it relates, and who were walking, as they were walking the streets of Havana, they kept saying, in his poem, we not black, we European. Now these are women who are obviously of mixed race, and therefore there's the African component in the genetics. What Nicolas again said, they were saying, we are not black, we are not African, we are Cuban, we are European. He said, but when I observed it, trasera, I observed that something was wrong. And trasera, in case you do not know what it means the backside. And he said, when I observed the trasera, all I can say is mentira, 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 mentira. And that means in good Bayesian terms, you lie. You lie. You lie. What I was saying, you may deny your African heritage, but when I see you, when you walk, I can see that you are African. So without any further words, I wish to say to the minister, thank you again. It is our pleasure to present this report to you today.
It is certainly a pleasure for me to be here this morning to witness a very important event, I believe, in the history of Barbados. The inaugural report, Barbados' first report on reparations, which is being provided in 2017. I am very sure that this report will be an enlightening document worthy of reading, not only by the Ministry and the Cabinet of Barbados, but certainly by each and every Barbadian. I recall a few years ago, after attending a special United Nations meeting on racism and xenophobia, I recall that Dr. Murray accompanied me to that meeting. And after the meeting, I signaled to him that I wanted to move speedily ahead to establish a reparations task force in Barbados. And I don't think that Derek at the time believed me, because when he came back to Barbados, after a few days, I reminded him of my instruction. And he said, but Minister, with pleasure. And I have to thank Derek for being one of the initiators in relation to moving the idea forward in relation to the establishment of the Barbados Task Force on Reparations. And therefore, the government of Barbados on October 12, 2012, established a national reparations task force under the chairmanship of historian Professor Fletcher Welch, whom you recently heard. And the task force had the very important mandate of conceptualizing and articulating important strategies and frameworks, and indeed projects for the attainment of reparations for the damage inflicted on people of African descent, and resulting, of course, from an era of European imposed slave trade, slavery, and colonialism. The Reparations Task Force is located administratively under the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Youth, and the Reparations Project has been conceptualized not merely as an effort to secure a monetary payment, but very importantly as part of a multifaceted campaign designed to sensitize all Barbadians on the historical and contemporary issues that inform an understanding of the very meaning of reparations itself. The establishment of this Reparations Task Force is therefore the culmination of a very long line of important developments that stretch back to the founding of the Commission for Pan-African Affairs in 1998, the work of the government-established Committee for National Reconciliation, whose 1999 report urged the government and the people of Barbados to support the international campaign for reparations, and also the 2007 CARICOM-sponsored bicentenary resolution in the United Nations that endorsed the legitimacy of reparations. The initiative taken by the government of Barbados to establish a national reparations task force should therefore also be placed within the very important context of regional development, such as the outstanding collaborative diplomatic effort made by CARICOM countries at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism in 2001 and the joint CARICOM African Union Conference on Reparations that was held right here in Barbados in August of 2007. Given this track record and given this history, it is therefore not surprising that the government of Barbados, in relation to the task force, had determined that the most effective way to pursue its mandate would be to firstly seek the engagement of a broad spectrum of Barbados civil society organizations, as well as the general public through a number of public fora, and secondly, to engage with similar government-established reparations committees from across the Caribbean region. That indeed was the first focused approach adopted by the task force, and I dare say a very enlightening approach in relation to ensuring that the public of Barbados and the Caribbean diaspora were fully consulted in relation to his work. In addition, collaboration was held with established Caribbean civil society reparations focus organizations with a clear attempt to put in place a collective multi-territory mechanism that would take responsibility for carrying out the necessary research, the necessary documentation, and of course the very important mass public discussion on the Caribbean's reparations claims, and ultimately, along with other CARICOM nations, for the presenting of those claims to the relevant international forum. To this end, therefore, the report which is being presented here this morning is certainly testimony to an ongoing successful engagement for the bodies which I just identified, and a substantial fulfillment of the mandate entrusted to this task force by the Cabinet of Barbados. The work of the task force, I'm sure you agree, has not yet ended, and I hope that your sleeves will be rolled up to continue what will be a pathway towards ensuring that this matter of reparations is given the proper and full treatment going forward. The government therefore expects to hear from this body, mainly the task force, as you continue to pursue the very important goal of reparations for the harm inflicted on our ancestors and for the residual effects of this on our current population. I therefore expect that the various cultural organizations, namely the National Cultural Foundation, the Task Force on Heritage Preservation, the Commission for Pan-African Affairs, the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, and other entities would work diligently together in a collaborative fashion in conducting very important research and producing diverse work to engage the public. This is indeed a very important task for you to pursue. The Task Force on Reparations, in my view, can benefit from ongoing research and the submission of material with which to engage a public that still needs to understand the importance of reparations and to understand many of the historical perspective with which, of course, we have to grapple with if we are to engage in the important aspect of creating a Barbados that is purposeful within the contents of world affairs. In this information age, we have many options to produce, to package, and certainly to disseminate information. And not only will it be richer for edifying our people, but we will develop the tactics necessary to fight for the rights of those who went before us. In fact, prior to receiving your report, I can say to you that the Cabinet of Barbados has already started to look at some of the areas in relation to self-reparations, and I heard Professor Welch referring to the issue of vending. I can say to you that about a month and a half ago, this matter of vending engaged very robust discussion at the Cabinet, and the Cabinet, as a result of that discussion, established a very important subcommittee headed by myself, and also the membership included a number of my colleague ministers. And we were given a very tight timeline to look at the issue of vending, particularly on our streets, and to provide a report to the Cabinet with recommendations. I can say to you that we have engaged fully on this issue with all of the relevant agencies of government, with bargaining, with the vendors themselves, and a very important report is now engaging the attention of the Cabinet. We are very resolute as a government to ensure that vending is fully incorporated within the economic activity of Barbados. And our intention is not in any way to disallow, or as some people would say, to make vending seen as an activity that should be scoffed at. We want to ensure that vending is appropriately regulated, but is fully integrated within the context of our economic activities in Barbados. And we are very fervent on ensuring that any obstacles which are currently and historically placed in front of persons who wish to vend legitimately are not there. And I believe that once that report is studied, you will be getting a very positive response from the Cabinet. So even before receiving the report, the Cabinet itself proactively looked at this issue of vending, particularly highway vending. And you will see that already efforts have been made in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Transport and Works, and other agencies of the government. Our focus, of course, and the focus of the country has been on the issue of coconut vending. And you realize that there is now a complete shift in the practice in relation to how the vendors at Warren's have taken on board the suggestions. The Ministry of Health have been working with them, and they are very much on board in relation to the fact that in plying their trade, there's got to be also a response from them in relation to dealing with the health issues and so on. But there are some very exciting recommendations in that report, and they are all geared towards the ensuring that the activity of vending is seen within its true historical context. I also want to say that certainly it is my view, because in recent times there has been a very robust escalation of the debate on Lord Nelson, and it is one of those historical issues that continues to bubble and to resurface. It is as though that the country itself will not rest until this issue is resolved one way or the other. And as fervently as I condemn the act of whoever would have defaced Lord Nelson, I think that that has to be certainly the approach of all law-abiding citizens It is not for any one person to deface or to do damage to any of our monuments, however they feel about the particular monument. But having said that, I also made the point that this issue of the public discussion or the public discourse on Lord Nelson ought to be one that is taken within a context of understanding the issues. And I think the task force also has a responsibility to educate Barbadians on this issue so that they are aware of the historical issues. And I also feel that, certainly as the Minister with responsibility for culture, that where there are issues of public importance, however contentious they are, there's need for an appropriate response. And I have no difficulty at all once this issue continues to be a critical part of the Barbadian discourse. I have no issue in taking that particular matter to the Cabinet for its consideration in relation to what comes out of the public discourse. I have asked for some research to be done on the issue of Lord Nelson, and I've received already some information in relation to what has happened on this issue historically, what government action would be taken, and where we are at as of today. And I can tell you that it is my intention that once I've studied the information, I would want to engage the Cabinet in a discussion. And I say in a discussion because I believe that any discussion which is looming to be a major point of national discourse inevitably becomes the concern of the government of the day and certainly the Cabinet. So I can just say to you that the discussion has not swerved over my head, but I have taken the position I want to hear more, and I certainly want to encourage more continued responsible discourse on matters of this kind. In relation to the work of the task force and of course the important issue of reparations, I can certainly say to you that the government will not retreat on its campaign for reparations for the injustices of slavery. We will continue to support campaigns, we will continue to support initiatives being undertaken by the task force on reparations, and we will indeed take strategic steps towards honouring all of those who went before us. In closing, I want to congratulate the members of the task force for your exemplary work in having this report conceptualized, and which of course the ministry hopes will not only become part of the public discourse, but the intention of course would be that this report is presented to the Cabinet for its consideration, and ultimately we can ensure that the report is provided for public dissemination. I did indicate to the Chairman that of course we have various publics, and in this age of social media and all the fancy things that occur, we have to be able to break this report down into sizable portions so that every child, every man, every woman in Barbados is able to understand and feel a sense of wanting to know more and to be involved. I attended a very important event in Jamaica recently, which was the opening of the reparations, the Research Reparations Center at Mona. And one of the things that came out, particularly in engaging with the young people who were there to present, was that this issue is not one that young people are unaware of. In fact, young people are extremely interested on issues of the history, issues that we sometimes take for granted in relation to their wanting to know. What young people want though is that they want to be engaged. So you have to be able to not only see this as the work of the task force, but there's a whole new generation of emerging Barbadians who has got to be engaged fully in order to ensure that this work of ensuring that the issue of reparations is addressed does not die with this current generation. So we have to spend a lot of time educating them, And we are all in this for the long haul. This is not something, in my view, that will be sorted in the short term. And therefore, our young people have got to be engaged. And therefore, when I say that the report has to be appropriately disseminated, if we want to engage young people, we have to be able to find ways to use their language, find ways to engage them at their levels, and also engage them so that they can become the advocates in relation to the content of the report to their peers as well. So that is something that I think we will work together on. The Division of Youth Affairs will need to be engaged, and all of our partners, to ensure that this report will become a living document and that the recommendations are not recommendations that remain in a room. It is certainly not my intention that this report occupies a space on a shelf anywhere and accumulates a lot of dust, that some reports go that way. We want to ensure that this report is really a beginning of important work that needs the full engagement of all Barbadians. And I know that that is the thinking of the task force. It is certainly my thinking, and I can assure you that that's the thinking of the cabinet. When we set up this task force, we did not just do it because we wanted to pay lip service to a very important issue. It was a solemn act of government to be a part of an issue that is much bigger than ourselves. And I think that we all have a solemn duty as the persons who are present here now in this age to play our part in taking this matter forward. And I feel that the chairman did make a very important point that we have to do quite a lot of education. We must not assume that every Barbadian understands. And in a sense, this has been one of the important work that is being done by the Commission of Pan-African Affairs. Raising the level of consciousness of Barbadians is extremely important, and if we don't do that, it will have significant impacts in relation to all aspects of our quest for continued development. It is critical to our how we understand ourselves, our levels of self-confidence. We can't build a nation unless we are confident about who we are. We can't engage in entrepreneurship unless we are confident about who we are. We can't talk about solving our economic challenges, our social and political challenges, unless we as a nation are confident. We can think about building a body of knowledge, building young people who feel inspired and who feel that they can conquer the world. This issue of reparations is critical and central to all of that. And that's the content in which we see it. So I want to implore you to continue to do this important work. May we endeavor to continue to edify and to inform as many persons as possible on this important issue of reparations. And of course, I want to end by certainly extending to all of you, your friends and your family, a very blessed Christmas and a very rewarding and productive and prosperous 2018. Thank you very much.